Yeah, because I wanted to hear the Filipino fan because I've never seen Alex play live.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
So what was your impression of the Filipino audience who watched Alex Eala on center court?
My impression of the Filipino fan was so amazing. That's why I stayed to watch the night match, to hear the fans, to feel the energy that comes, because that's all we talk about, but I haven't been able to experience it in person. So I stayed after I was done with work, and I had an absolute amazing experience to see the energy of the crowd.
Coco Vandeweghe stayed late. After her broadcast shift was done, after the work was finished, after she had every reason to pack up and leave, she stayed. She wanted to hear the crowd. She wanted to feel what everyone had been talking about, but she hadn't experienced firsthand. And after one night courtside watching Alex Eala play at Indian Wells, she came back on air and set the record straight about exactly what is happening to this sport right now, not as a courtesy, not as a hot take designed to generate attention. As someone who just sat inside the stadium, past midnight, with the flag still waving around her, and felt the full weight of what this rise actually looks like in person. What she said afterward is the part of this story that the tennis world hasn't fully processed yet. And it goes a lot deeper than crowd numbers and ticket sales. Drop your take in the comments, and let's get into all of it.
I'm excited to see what Eala has left in the drop, because we are talking about a player that is somebody that we're going to see for many years. And this is her first time at the BNP Paribas Open, so everything is a new experience.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's start with the moment itself, because it tells you everything before a single stat gets mentioned. Coco Vandeweghe is a former top 10 player, a Grand Slam semifinalist, someone who has been inside professional tennis long enough to have seen every version of crowd energy this sport produces. Packed Grand Slam draws, iconic night sessions, home crowd atmospheres at the biggest events in the world.
That I think as a young player is the best thing that she has going for her game, because that's sometimes a hard thing for a lot of players to be able to create. You see a lot of players erupt, and even yesterday against Coco Gauff, she was playing somebody that was injured but kept mentally focused, kept solid, and didn't let anything bother her. And plus, not having the crowd even overwhelming, because as a young player, when I used to have a crowd going my way, it was shocking and overwhelming because it's nothing that you experience. She has such an even head on her shoulders, and it's so impressive. The rest of the game, the physicality, the power, that's only going to keep improving, but sometimes mentality isn't something you can teach.
She is not easily impressed. She is not the type to perform enthusiasm for cameras or manufacture reactions for broadcast. When she says something is special, she means it, and people who follow her closely know the difference. And she stayed late. Not because her job required it. Not because someone asked her to. Because she genuinely wanted to know if the reality matched the reputation she had been hearing about all week. She wanted to sit in it herself and make her own judgment. Her verdict came back without hesitation. She said the Filipino fan energy was so amazing, it was the entire reason she stayed. And when she went back on broadcast, she wasn't reporting on a phenomenon she had read about or analyzed from data. She was describing something she had just experienced firsthand, with her own eyes, past midnight, in the California desert.
My only question mark with Alex is she has never played here, and playing here in this facility, you see how beautiful it is, how many people are on the grounds. It's just like a Grand Slam tournament. And being in a new facility, a new venue, that's always exciting because you don't know where the locker rooms are, you don't know where all these little things that you don't think about as a fan. Alex is comfortable. Everywhere is Alex's home.
That distinction matters more than it might seem. There are countless people talking about the Isla phenomenon right now. Most of them are doing it from a distance, from studios, from social media, from match stats on a screen. Vandeweghe is talking about it from inside the stadium, from the actual seat. And what she said from that position carries a completely different kind of authority. What Vandeweghe said on broadcast went further than atmosphere. She made a specific argument about what Eala is doing for the WTA that the tour doesn't produce very often. She said Eala packs every single court she walks onto. Not the featured courts, not the primetime slots. Every court, regardless of schedule, regardless of timing, regardless of who she's playing. And she pointed to the late-night match, still drawing a full and vocal crowd, as proof that the pull isn't about logistics or favorable scheduling. It's entirely about the person on the other side of the net.
For women's tennis. And I particularly was so happy to hear just everybody talking about Alex, whether it was the crowd, it was officials, the Uber drivers, just the restaurant waiters. Everyone definitely heard about Alex Eala. She was a rock star in Indian Wells. The fans were like packing up the stadium.
And then she landed on the detail that made people stop mid-scroll. Fans telling her directly in conversation courtside. I buy Tennis Channel just to watch Alex, not to follow the WTA, not to watch the sport broadly, to watch one specific player. And when that player isn't scheduled, some of them are running monthly subscriptions. Pay when she plays, pause when she doesn't. That is not casual fandom. That is a fan base that has restructured its entire relationship with tennis around one name. Vandeweghe recognized immediately what that means. The commercial implications alone are significant. A player who single-handedly drives subscription decisions at a broadcast level is an asset that tournament directors and network executives notice very quickly. But the cultural implication is even larger. It means Eala isn't just drawing tennis fans, she's creating them. People who had no relationship with the WTA Tour before are now paying monthly fees to follow one player across one season. That is new audience development in its most organic form, and it's happening without a marketing campaign behind it. Now let's put the actual tennis week in full context. Because the crowd story only lands the way it does because the performance on court was backing it up completely. Eala came into Indian Wells and won her first 2 matches without dropping a set. Clean, efficient, purposeful tennis. And then the draw delivered the match everyone wanted to see. Coco Gauff, world number 4, 2-time Grand Slam champion. Someone who had beaten Eala 6-0 just 2 weeks earlier in Dubai. The setup for a straightforward Gauff win was as clean as it gets. Recent head-to-head, ranking gap, experience gap. Every number pointed the same direction. What happened instead was one of the most complete single-set performances of the entire Indian Wells tournament. Gauff won the first 2 games and looked fully settled. Then Eala won 6 straight. 6 consecutive games against the world number 4 on Stadium 1 at Indian Wells. The final first set scoreline was 6-2, the exact same margin Gauff had used to dismantle Eala in Dubai, just completely flipped. The serve numbers tell the story underneath the story. In her first 2 matches at the tournament, Eala was winning 59% of points on her first serve. Against Gauff, the number dropped to 36%. And she still won the set convincingly. She absorbed Gauff's pace, redirected shots into gaps with precise angles, and forced the kind of long, grinding rallies where her court coverage and recovery speed become overwhelming advantages. Every time Gauff pushed aggressively, Eala had a response. Every time Gauff tried to shorten the rallies with attacking shots, Eala kept the ball deep and forced errors from positions Gauff didn't expect to be defending from. The second set began with Eala breaking immediately. Gauff's physical issues emerged and ultimately forced the retirement. The match lasted 55 minutes. In those 55 minutes, the scoreline was heading somewhere that nobody in that stadium had predicted when the players walked out.
You know, you can't buy that. So, yeah, I definitely, and I see why people want to root for her, and I root for her even when I'm not playing her, of course.
Gauff's press conference settled the narrative completely. She didn't reach for the injury as an explanation. She talked about the slow courts, the long points, the physical demands of playing someone who never gives you an easy ball. And then she said Eala was the best in those conditions. Not competitive. Not well-suited. The best. Full stop. From the world number 4, on the day it happened. That is a statement that echoes.
I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say it is great to be on a crowded court. I've played this tournament for many years, and to see the stadium full, it means a lot. And also, like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport. I really appreciate I think it's great. I know sometimes it's tough when you're playing against a home crowd, but I think that it's great for the sport. So keep being enthusiastic and keep rooting for your player. Yeah.
But the moment that spread furthest, the one that crossed beyond the tennis world into broader conversation, wasn't the scoreline. It was what happened immediately after the match ended. Eala didn't celebrate. She didn't let the cameras catch her doing anything that resembled relief or triumph. Her first instinct was to turn the conversation entirely toward her opponent's health. She said in her post-match session that this wasn't the way she wanted to win.
Yeah, so back to your question, I really didn't want to win this way, but this is still a really big moment for me to be able to play on Stadium 1 of Indian Wells and against such a great competitor.
That winning under those circumstances wasn't how she had imagined it. That she wished Goff a fast and full recovery point, 20 years old, career-defining win, biggest result of her life to that point. And the first thing she did was make sure the focus and the credit went to the right places.
Our energies on Coco getting better. We love you, Coco.
That is not standard post-match behavior. Most players at that age, in that moment, with that result, would have been perfectly justified in letting the celebration breathe. Ella chose differently. She chose to acknowledge the competitor she had just beaten, wish her well publicly, and frame her own happiness around the quality of her performance rather than the circumstances of the scoreline. Vandeweghe noticed that. Pegula noticed it. Every player on tour who has been watching this rise closely noticed it. And it's accumulating into something. A reputation that is being built in real time, match by match, and press conference by press conference. As one of the most composed and genuinely grounded young players the WTA has produced in years. There's a personal dimension to Vandeweghe's investment in this story that gives everything she says a different texture. And it's the part that didn't get nearly enough attention. Her mother is Filipino, which means the phenomenon Vandeweghe has been watching build across the past year isn't abstract for her, and never was. She's watched it through her mother's eyes, as much as through her own broadcast lens. She's seen what Eala's matches mean inside her own family, the excitement, the pride, the personal investment in every result. When her mother went to the U.S. Open last year and came back talking about wanting a photo with Eala, that wasn't a fan story Vandeweghe heard secondhand, it was her kitchen table. That personal connection fundamentally changes the nature of her public comments. She's not defending Eala because it's the popular take or because the broadcast moment calls for enthusiasm. She's doing it because she understands specifically, from the inside, from her own home, what this rise means to a community that has been waiting a very long time for this exact moment. The Filipino community doesn't just watch Eala's matches. They gather for them. They plan dinners around them. They wake up at odd hours for live time zones and subscribe to channels they'd never heard of 6 months ago. Vandeweghe has seen that devotion up close. And when she goes on broadcast and calls it amazing, when she stays past midnight just to sit inside it, she's drawing on something much deeper than professional analysis. Vandeweghe also made a broader structural point that deserves to be taken seriously beyond the immediate storyline. She said tennis is a global sport, one that everyone can play, watch, and enjoy. And she framed Eala's rise specifically as proof of what that global potential looks like when it actually materializes instead of just existing as a talking point in development meetings. Because the numbers at Indian Wells made the argument for her. Eala's opening match generated over $5 million in ticket sales and broke the tournament's own attendance records before the second week had even started. California has the largest Filipino population in the entire United States, close to 2 million people, and they didn't need international flights or visa logistics to be there. They were already present, already organized, and they arrived at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden in a volume that turned practice sessions into capacity events and prompted a former ATP professional to make a public safety argument about court assignments, before a single competitive ball had been struck. This is what organic global growth looks like. Not a marketing campaign targeting a demographic. Not a strategic partnership designed to build awareness in a new market. A player from the Philippines who is genuinely extraordinary, whose community shows up in full every single time, and whose presence is physically transforming venues that have been running the same format for decades. Vandeweghe knows exactly how rare that is, and she's saying so on broadcast because she thinks the tour needs to hear it and respond to it accordingly. The round of 16 loss brought the Indian Wells chapter to a close, but nothing about that loss changed the substance of what Vandeweghe was saying, and her position didn't shift by a single degree when the result came in. One defeat doesn't rewrite a week in which a 20-year-old beat the world number 4 so completely that the world number 4 credited the performance from her own podium. It doesn't erase the practice courts that couldn't contain the crowd, the midnight atmosphere, the flag still flying after the last point of the tournament. It doesn't change the fact that Eala is inside the top 30, has beaten multiple top 10 players across 2 tournaments in the same month, and is heading to Miami, the exact tournament where she introduced herself to the world a year ago, carrying more experience, sharper tennis, and a fan base that has only expanded since that first breakthrough. The points from last year's Miami semi-final run are due for defense. A deep run matches them and keeps the rankings stable at a critical moment. A deeper run pushes her into the top 20 for the first time, changing her seedings at Grand Slams, changing the draws she enters, and changing the conversation from rising star with potential to established force with results. That top 20 threshold is right there, and everything about how she has played and carried herself across the past 2 months suggests she is ready for it. Coco Vandeweghe stayed late at Indian Wells because she wanted to feel what everyone had been describing. She felt it. And then she came back on air and told the truth about it. Not as a favor to a young player, not as broadcast filler, but as a former professional who recognized something genuinely significant and said so out loud. A player who is changing the atmosphere of the WTA Tour simply by being in it. A fan base that plans its life around match schedules and subscribes to broadcast channels for one name. A 20-year-old who handles all of it, the wins, the losses, the crowds, the pressure, the cameras, with a grace and composure that makes veterans stop and reassess what they thought they knew about how long development takes. Miami is next. The story is nowhere near finished. And if Vandeweghe's read is right, and the evidence suggests it is, the most significant chapters haven't been written yet. Hit like, subscribe, and drop your prediction in the comments. How deep does Eala go in Miami? And is the top 20 coming before the end of this swing? This one is far from over.